Muslim is narrated to us by Jabir, and it's in the long hadith where Jabir tells us about the Prophet ﷺ's farewell Hajj. And I narrated pieces of this hadith in the past for other reasons. Tonight I'm going to start a new theme. Not because the one before I got bored of it, but I think I've talked about it before, actually at a point in the past, and I'd forgotten. So we talked about the unity of Muslims, and I gave maybe 12 khawat or 12 hadith regarding that theme, and I think there's at least another 50, if not more. It's one of the things the Prophet ﷺ definitely spoke a lot about, and we should all have a good grasp on it. I'm going to move on to something a little bit different, inshallah, over the next week or so. And it's the importance of holding on to your deen, and not your deen in general, but specifically to the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there's a point of, obviously, of me choosing this theme, and it'll become a bit more clear as I kind of go through the hadith night after night. But the hadith tonight is something the Prophet ﷺ said during that farewell sermon, during his Hajj, the only Hajj he actually performed, and it's one of the last pieces of that farewell sermon, one of the last things he said, ﷺ. And when you think about it, it's a very important sermon. I always narrate it around Hajj time, but honestly, it kind of undermines its importance a little bit when we only narrate it during that period of the year, because when you think about it, ﷺ had limited access to large groups of people, unlike today where you're sitting and there's a camera faced, you'll end up reaching hundreds. You'll reach whoever wants to reach you. But the Prophet ﷺ that wasn't obviously there. So when he spoke to people in Medina, in the masjid, he only reached maybe a couple of thousand people tops every week. Like that's the highest number. Even though people wanted to come, it's just there wasn't enough space, and if you came to the masjid, the Prophet ﷺ is full, then you can't hear anything, you can barely see anything. So you just pray in the masjid in your neighborhood. It's probably better, you're better off. Or waiting for one of the Sahaba to come and be imam for you. You get access at least to the person who's going to be praying imam. You get to hear something afterwards. You actually get the benefit. So ﷺ had limited access. And then when the farewell sermon came along during that last Hajj, he stood and he spoke to 100,000. And he had literally some people who were responsible for, on horseback to go in and let others know what he said, like repeating, like they functioned as microphones for him. And he would wait, ﷺ, until they reached the end of the crowd and came back. It would take 10, 15 minutes for this to happen. So there's one sermon that if I read the whole sermon, it would take maybe 6.5 minutes. I know I'm quick, but let's say I slow down, then 10 minutes stops. It took him maybe 3 hours to give because it's just, there's so many people. So you can imagine that what he said, ﷺ, during the sermon must have been very important, because it's the only chance he knows this is the end of his life, ﷺ. He's very aware this is the last time. He tells them that in the middle of the sermon, that I'm probably not going to ever see you in this sense ever again. So he knew it was the last time, and this was the largest group of people he ever spoke to, ﷺ. So the points he chose were extremely important. And this is what he said within that hadith, what I'm going to narrate to you. قال وقد تركت فيكم ما لن تضلوا بعده إن اعتصمتم به كتاب الله وأنتم ستسألون عني فما أنتم قائلون فقلنا نشهد أنك قد بلغت وأديت ونصحت. So he says, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, during this hadith, I have left amongst you that which if you hold on to properly, you will never go astray again. You will never be lost again. You will never lose your way. You will never find yourself in a state of confusion. You'll always know something that will anchor you, will keep you on the right path, will be your compass. And then he said, Kitabullah, the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he said right after that, and you will be asked about me on the day of judgment, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. This is what he was preparing for all his life. It doesn't have to do a lot with the theme, but it's a part of the hadith. He asked this question, you're going to be asked about me on the day of judgment. فَمَا أَنْتُمْ قَائِلُونَ. What are you going to say? What is your answer? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks you about me, in terms of what I did, how did I do? It's been 23 years. What is your opinion in what I have offered you? And the guidance that I have brought you, and the leadership that I have shown, and the example that I tried to put forward, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So the answer from the groups was, نشهد, we will bear witness, أنك بلغت وأديت ونصحت, that you conveyed the message, that you fulfilled your purpose, and that you advised us and gave us the best example possible. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And it's an important point that maybe we'll talk about in a different theme. But still, the point of this hadith is that he made it very clear. He stated this: I left amongst you that which if you are to hold on to, you will never lose your way. The book of Allah. Just hold on to that. Just make sure that you adhere to it, and you'll never have a problem. When you think about it, over the generations, over the centuries, it's been 1400 years now that Muslims have been around. Historically, the number of times, the amount of war and conflict, and the number of times that Islam has been under siege, like the number of times it's happened over history has been actually quite exaggerated. Like it's a lot, like in comparison to other, a lot has happened to Muslims all over the planet for a very long time. And the only reason that Islam is still around, the only reason that the Arabic language is still spoken and still exists is because of that book. There's nothing else. What anchored Islam was the fact that the Quran was preserved, people memorized it, people understood it, people studied it, it protected the language, it protected the people, it protected the faith. Yes, there are Muslims who have gone completely astray, but honestly, it's not very hard for them to find their way back. It's easy because at the end of the day, we just have to open and read. And the message is clear, and the values are there, and the principles are there. Even if for some reason you ended up going down a different path, or you got lost, or you were told things, it's not difficult, really. We can always because we have something in common amongst all Muslims, just go back to that book. Once you open it and start reading it, it tells you exactly what it is that you need to do. It leaves very little, at least for the bigger issues, like for the actual principles and values and the actual rulings that are important. It leaves very little place for argument and those who sometimes you hear people arguing certain things. It's just they don't really read the Quran. Like they're just not interested in reading the book, and they don't even look at it as actual evidence. It's more of just maybe just more of a catalog, or just something there as a token, but not really as evidence. If you treat it the way it should be treated, then there's no way. Muslims will always find their way. No matter how far they go, there's always something that will anchor them and bring them back, which is the book of Allah. And I don't know why we would look for answers or look for salvation anywhere else. يروي الإمام مسلم في صحيحه عن جابر بن عبد الله في حديث حجة الوداع الطويل حيث قال فيه صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم: وقد تركت فيكم ما لن تضلوا بعده إن اعتصمتم به كتاب الله أو كتاب الله وأنتم ستسألون عني فما أنتم قائلون فقالوا نشهد أنك قد بلغت وأديت ونصحت. صدق رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Inshallah, after prayer we will have the